Good afternoon. I'm pleased to see you, and I'm pleased to be joined by Budget Director Ryan Osmundson. Thanks to him and the hardworking, dedicated, and innovative team in the Budget Office, we're pleased to roll out a historic budget. We're previewing it here today before we officially unveil all the details next week. Like we did with our first budget, we're cutting taxes, holding the line on spending, making our communities and families safer, more secure, and stronger. When it comes down to it, our budget is built for hardworking Montana families. In this budget, we are cutting their income and property taxes by $1 billion, the biggest tax cut in our state's history. We encourage job creation. We provide a child tax credit and an adoption tax credit to make it easier for parents to raise their kids. We invest to make our schools better and our communities safer. We make it easier to bring affordable, attainable housing into greater reach for Montanans. And just like families across our state, we spend and invest our surplus responsibly, repairing what needs to be fixed, saving for unexpected emergencies, paying off our debt, and returning $1 billion back to taxpayers. Our budget is balanced, fiscally responsible, and avoids cuts to essential services. Our budget is built for hardworking Montana families. As I've said, the worst kept secret in Helena and across Montana is we're going to cut taxes again in the next legislative session. Our budget cuts taxes for hardworking Montanans by $1 billion. Let me say that again. We're cutting Montanans' taxes by $1 billion, the largest tax cut in Montana's history. $500 million will go to permanent income tax cuts and $500 million in property tax relief over the next 2 years. I fundamentally believe hardworking Montanans should keep more of what they earn. And with inflation at a high not seen in 40 years, providing Montanans with tax relief is all that more important. When we took office 22 months ago, the top income tax rate in our state was 6.9%. And in our first few months, we cut it to 6.5%. With our new budget, we're cutting it again to 5.9%. With prices rising faster than they have in 40 years, it's becoming harder and harder for Montanans to make ends meet. That's why our budget cuts taxes for Montana families with a permanent child tax credit. This $1,200 tax credit for younger kids will make it easier for parents to pay for what kids need: childcare, preschool, health care, diapers, food, and clothing. And while our budget helps hardworking Montana parents pay for childcare and other essentials, we must also make it easier for Montanans to open their happy, healthy, loving home to children. The high cost of adoption, sometimes more than $40,000, can be an obstacle for families to adopt children. That's why our budget provides families with an adoption tax credit of $5,000. Every child deserves a loving home, and we should make it easier for that to happen. Taken together, our income tax cuts, child tax credit, and adoption tax credit deliver a historic, largest ever income tax cut totaling more than $500 million over the next 2 years. While we're cutting income taxes at a historic level, we're also cutting property taxes at the highest level ever, $500 million over the next 2 years. As I met with Montanans in every corner of our state, I hear repeated concerns about rising property taxes. and they're right to be concerned. Property taxes are too high. While the state receives only a small fraction of property taxes, we believe Montanans should have property tax relief. We're delivering it with this budget. Yes, local governments use property taxes to fund schools, law enforcement, and roads, but some local governments have been spending at a rate far higher than inflation and population growth. As a result, Montanans are feeling the impact of ever-rising property taxes. And let me be clear, local governments should not spend and tax Montanans out of their home. The issue is top of mind across Montana right now. Folks are getting their property tax bills and figuring out how to pay it. Our $500 million property tax cut will go straight to property owners, to Montanans for their primary residences. They'll see relief directly from the state in 2023 and 2024. And while we're providing this $500 million in property tax relief this year, next year, and 2024, there are reforms that need to go along with this. First, we must increase transparency and accountability. Folks ought to know what they're paying for in their property tax bill and how much their local government spending changes year to year. Second, Montanans should be able to pay their property taxes monthly, not just in November and May. And finally, local government should take a page out of the state's playbook and be fiscally responsible. Local government should reject the federal government's playbook of out-of-control spending. Many of our local governments are good stewards of taxpayers' money, but too many are not. When it comes down to it, hardworking Montanans balance their budgets and make tough decisions. So, too, should local government. Cutting income taxes and property taxes for Montana families are key pillars in our budget. We are able to do this, in part, due to our historic surplus. How did we get this surplus? In 2021, the federal government was cranking open its spending spigot, and we anticipated a sugar high from the out-of-control spending. We planned accordingly here in Montana with a conservative, responsible budget, a budget that would leave us in a strong position with or without the federal spending. As it turned out, the excess federal spending, along with our pro-growth, pro-jobs policies, brought us to a point where we have a historic surplus. Now, imagine you got a sizable bonus check at work. What would you and your family do with it? Well, you'd probably fix something that needs to be repaired, a leaky roof or an old furnace. You'd put some money away for an emergency, and you'd pay down or pay off your debt. You'd pay off a credit card or get ahead on your car payments or make an extra mortgage payment or two. In addition to providing Montanans with $1 billion in tax relief, that's how we're approaching our historic surplus. Making repairs, saving for emergencies, and paying off our debt. Using our surplus, we're fixing what needs to be repaired. Our budget makes necessary investments in critical infrastructure. First, after more than a decade of Band-Aids at best and kicking the can down the road at worst, we're making the biggest investment ever in our state-run health facilities. For the good of our families, our communities, and the most vulnerable among us, we're making a $300 million generational commitment to Montana's behavioral health care system. The state hospital is a critical safety net for those who need access to acute inpatient psychiatric care. Let me be clear, we will not close Warm Springs. In fact, we will repair it, better ensure patient and provider safety, and improve patient services. And beyond Warm Springs and across our state, we will invest in intensive behavioral health care and community-based services for outpatient care. We face an epidemic of addiction that's gripping our communities and tearing families apart. That's why it's critical we continue building a full continuum of substance use prevention and treatment programs for communities across Montana. We're building on the success of our Heart Fund from last legislative session and boosting its funding by 50%. Second, after more than a decade of neglect, like we've had at the state hospital, the state prison is in disrepair. A disrepair that threatens the safety of correctional officers and inmates alike. Our budget invests nearly $200 million to repair it and ultimately expand capacity. This investment will make our prison and our communities safer. Third, with Montana families struggling to find affordable workforce housing, we must increase our housing supply. To help increase Montana's access to affordable, attainable housing, our budget invests $200 million to expand water and sewer infrastructure. For local governments to be eligible for this funding, they will have to meet certain requirements, including increased density to make housing affordable. Finally, we're investing $100 million towards repairing our roads and bridges. Too often, the state leaves federal dollars on the table. Our historic investment in repairing our infrastructure will allow us to better leverage federal funds and not unnecessarily leave federal dollars on the table. And while Montana families know how important it is to repair what needs fixing, they also save for unexpected emergencies. With our surplus, we're bolstering our savings for unexpected emergencies. Like Montana family, the state faces a serious threat: economic uncertainty, once-in-a-generation inflation, and a potential recession. Misguided federal policies are making these threats greater and more severe, and they threaten the economic and financial security of hardworking Montanans. But they also threaten the strength and stability of our state's budget. That's why our budget doubles the state's rainy day fund. If national policies continue to put Montanans' economic security at risk, we must guard against it. Second, we've seen more severe wildfires that threaten Montana's homes, property, and livelihoods. Our wildland firefighters have done an outstanding job during very trying conditions to protect our homes, properties, and livelihoods. To ensure the state is well prepared to respond to wildfires, our budget nearly triples our fire suppression fund. And it invests $10 million per year to expand the scope of active forest management so we can become better stewards of our forests. Hardworking Montanans also understand the importance of paying down and paying off our debts. If we have a little extra money in their pocket, they pay down or pay off their debts, from credit cards to car payments to mortgages. The state should be no different. Our budget will make Montana debt-free in 23. Our budget pays off all general obligation debt on the books. By paying off our debt and making Montana debt-free in 23, the state will save about $40 million per biennium. We're passing those savings, the interest and principal payments that we'll no longer have, back to taxpayers through permanent tax relief. After cutting Montanans' income and property taxes by $1 billion, the state should use our surplus to make needed repairs, save for emergencies, and pay off our debt, just as hardworking Montana families do. But our budget isn't just about cutting Montanans' income and property taxes. It's also about making our families and communities stronger. Our budget spurs job creation, boosts education, and opens the door of greater opportunity for more hardworking Montanans. First, we propose to further reform the state's business equipment tax. When we came into office in 2021, we tripled the business equipment tax exemption to $300,000. With this year's budget, we expand that exemption to $1 million. Taken together, we will remove more than 5,000 small businesses, farms, and ranches from the business equipment tax rolls. With those savings, these small business owners, farmers, and ranchers can invest in their operations and create more good-paying Montana jobs. Second, our budget expands on our successful efforts to build a stronger and more highly skilled workforce. We nearly double the Montana Trades Education Credit to boost skills of hardworking Montanans to meet needs of employers right now and well into the future. And third, to ensure our kids have access to the best education possible, we're doubling the cap of the Big Sky scholarships. And to ensure more educators can start their careers teaching our kids in Montana, we are increasing the TEACH Act funding by 40% to further increase their starting pay. But better opportunities, from more good-paying jobs to investments in education to greater access to affordable workforce housing, don't mean much when Montanans look over their shoulders and are worried about their safety and that of their community. That's why we're expanding capacity at the state prison. And it's why our budget funds 16 new highway patrol officers and criminal investigators, as well as 6 new prosecutors at the Montana Department of Justice. These criminal investigation agents will focus on drug trafficking, human trafficking, narcotics, major crimes, and crimes against children. And the new highway patrol officers will strengthen our drug interdiction program. And while we crack down on criminals peddling dangerous drugs like fentanyl into our communities, we're also focused on expanding access to treatment and recovery for those struggling with addiction. Our budget boosts the Heart Fund by 50% and permanently funds 8 drug courts across the state that are losing federal funding. I realize there's a lot in this budget. $500 million in permanent income tax cuts, including a child tax credit and adoption credit, $500 million in property tax relief for Montanans for their primary residence in 2023 and 2024, using the state's surplus to repair what needs to be fixed, save for unexpected emergencies, and pay off our debt, making Montana debt-free in 23. Making historic investments in behavioral health care, making historic investments in our state-run facilities like the state hospital and the state prison that are in disrepair, making historic investments in infrastructure to repair our roads and bridges, increase our housing supply, and grow Montanans' access to affordable, attainable housing, spurring job creation, boosting education, making our communities safer. And while our budget is historic for its tax cuts and critical, prudent investments, our budget is also fiscally responsible. Our budget is balanced. Our budget holds the line on spending, keeping its growth well below inflation. Our budget has a strong ending fund balance to protect against economic and financial uncertainty. Our budget avoids cuts to essential services. Montana taxpayers entrust us to be good stewards of their hard-earned money. And I'm proud that our budget, built for hardworking Montana families, fulfills their trust. And with that, I'd be happy to open it up for questions.
I'm curious about, as you're looking at using the surplus or things you're talking about versus, it looks like the property tax is just really biennial that we're into. How do you balance so that we don't have cuts that once that surplus is gone, we might be looking to use the surplus because we have these plans?
Yeah, so good question, Holly. As we looked at the surplus, there's really 2 categories. There's one-time money and there's structural money. All of the permanent relief in tax that we're providing is coming out of the structural money that we can be assured will be there in the future. Investments like the state hospital, the prison, the rebates on property taxes, that's really coming out of the one-time money. So that's why this is a sound budget, not just for this biennium, but it puts us in good shape for future periods as well.
What sort of communication do you have with county governments about the property tax changes? You talk about what you'd like to see the responsibility there. Have you heard feedback from what you proposed?
Well, I've heard a lot from Montanans all over the state about the need to get property taxes down. And we have a historic opportunity here with the surplus that we can give working families, Montana residents in their primary homes relief over the next 2 years while we work with the counties to get provisions in place that hopefully we can slow the growth of property taxes.
Is there any sort of cap on, like, is the property tax ever just the flat amount? Is it scaled to the value of the home? Or is that?
Well, I know Ryan is looking forward to having a sit down with you next week to go through the details. So we'll save the details for next week, but we'll lay the whole plan out for you. You're on question 5, I think. We'll come back. Go ahead.
You talked about avoiding cuts to essential services, but are there any places where you found cuts that you feel are necessary in the state's budget?
I don't know if you want to address that, Ryan. I mean, we've looked for efficiencies across all of government, but I don't think in any case we've actually cut services. There might be some areas where, like, we're putting in a new system at the labor and industry, and we can get better efficiencies from some attrition, in that particular area. But in most part, I don't know if you want to comment there, Ryan.
Yeah, I just would echo the governor's comments. I mean, we've found a lot of areas where we can make some efficiencies, but not necessarily cuts to, obviously not to essential services. So, but a lot of efficiencies, and we're anxious to roll those out to the legislature.
What is the total debt that the state has that is looking to be paid off?
So the total general fund obligation is roughly $130 million as it stands.
And that would say that 40, so 20 million a year.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Talk about investing in behavioral health care, and one of the studies that the state commission found that Montana's Medicaid rates for behavioral health care providers were about $30 million annually below benchmark standards. That's not including the federal portion. Does your budget include that $30 million annually to bring those specifically behavioral health care provider Medicaid rates up to?
There are adjustments in the rates. I don't know if you want to comment on that. You want to go through it next week?
We'll go through it next week. Yes, it does. I mean, it addresses the provider.
That's in the base budget.
Sorry, and then I was going to ask about the state hospital. I believe the director Burton estimated, I'm going to forget the number, but millions of dollars to bring the state hospital back into compliance with the federal requirements. And can you put a dollar figure on what fixes and investments you're talking about? Does that include getting federal compliance back?
Well, the situation we have in Warm Springs is completely unacceptable. And we didn't get there in a day. It's been brewing for a long time. In this budget, as I mentioned in my comments, we've set aside $300 million for behavioral health, both for Warm Springs and community-based outpatient services across the state. So we'll invest the money necessary to bring Warm Springs up to the quality care we need to have. I'm going to let Brooke take one online, then we'll come back to you, Holly.
We have Connor from Nonstop Local. Connor, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Connor.
Hi, Governor. My question is on, obviously after elections and everything, with these new state representatives, what's the next legislature going to look like?
Well, I spent most of yesterday calling them all. I spoke with, reached out to virtually all the new legislators in the state. I like the process because everybody gets to bring their ideas. This budget is our proposal. We think it's sound. We've put a lot of energy into it. I think good ideas can come from Republicans, Democrats, Independents. And my message to them was very simple. It's like, congratulations on your win. Look forward to seeing you in January and bring your best ideas. And I'm quite proud of what we did in the last session. 69% of the bills that I signed into law were voted for between 80 and 100% of the legislators. So over 2/3 were broadly bipartisan. And I think we have in Montana, we respect each other and we can recognize good ideas when we see them. Holly?
Yeah, looking at, building bars, questions of North Springs, and then listen to current struggle with improving the retention of workers, is it anything you're looking at the budget to help increase the field?
Yeah, so recruiting's been an issue in every industry, in every corner of the state. Doesn't matter if it's teachers or nurses or correctional officers. We adjusted pay there, and that's had some positive impact. We still have some work to do. And having a state-of-the-art facility that's modern and not a risk to the employees, that's going to help as well. And that's where the bulk of these dollars are focused. We'll take one online.
We have Josh from NBC.
Hi, Josh.
Can you hear me out there?
Yes.
Governor, my question, you talked about what you think is for excess spending that, from local governments that ends up, costing taxpayers. What are some examples of that? It sounds like most of it's property tax related.
Well, yeah, and that was the point I was making. The state doesn't receive very much of the property taxes that Montanans pay. The vast majority of it goes to the local municipality or county government. And many of these local officials are good stewards of these dollars. We have some outliers. So we'll be working with the legislature, I think, on some common sense reforms here that hopefully we can keep property tax under control.
On the same vein, I'm thinking about public school districts who might look at property tax cuts and then also increase the credit school tax credit. I wonder if you've spoken with public school administrations and organizations about making ends meet with those in place.
Yeah, so we need strong schools. That's why we've invested in increasing teacher pay here, and we've structured the property tax relief in such a way that no money will be taken away from the schools. Online?
We have Kate with the Daily Internet.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Governor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My question is how or will the property tax cut affect or help renters in the state?
So the relief that we're bringing for renters in the state is really focused out of the housing task force that we put together. It's really not related to the property tax because the property tax relief is targeted to Montana residents in their primary residence where they are owners. For renters, we need to increase the supply of housing. One of the provisions in our budget is additional money for infrastructure. Currently, infrastructure dollars are primarily available only for replacing aging infrastructure. There is no provision generally for new infrastructure, which might be needed in a community that is expanding. In this budget, we're allocating $100 million available to local communities if they use it in such a way that they put higher density housing that would be lower cost. This often would become rental properties. So hopefully that'll help increase the supply and make housing more attainable.
On the topic of housing, one of the recommendations in the task force was developing a state affordable housing tax credit program. Is that in the budget?
That is not currently in the budget. We adopted many of the provisions. Many of the provisions that were put forward in the task force are incorporated. Other ones we're still studying. So we'll have that discussion with the legislature come January.
So additional to density, ways to incentivize density, is there anything about incentivizing affordable housing development, not just because of an addition of housing, but targeted to being affordable?
Yes, that's exactly what our program does. So we'll take a question online.
We have a follow-up from Connor with Nonstop Local.
Hi, Connor.
Hi, Governor. I wanted to touch base. Obviously there was a lot invested in, the Supreme Court race. How do you feel about the Montana results?
We didn't see it nationally, but we had a big red wave in Montana. And I look forward to working with legislators of both parties coming in the session. Supreme Court has been very clear. I back James Brown. I think he'd bring a constitutional lawyer to the bench. Because I backed him, I was disappointed he didn't win. But if he were to run again, I'd support him. He would have been a great justice on the Supreme Court.
Just to clarify, make sure you understand, affordable housing is the density
There's a number of provisions that'll be in the final thing. We'll go through some of the details next week when we sit down. Density is the most obvious one, multifamily. There's a number of other things, but we're not a big fan of set-asides for affordability because it skews the marketplace. We think we primarily need to focus on increased supply as a way to stabilize and bring prices down.
Are you able to say, understanding the details coming next week, which have tax credits for like ages, I'm assuming for to certain ages?
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, at this point, we chose from 0 to 5, so that's what the age limit will be at this point.
And, I'm sorry, that's 1,200 annually?
That's correct.
And is that something that's going to be, like,
Permanent.
was a paid every month for adjust your taxes?
It would be on your taxes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, think of it as a $1,200 per child refundable tax credit, basically till kids get into elementary school. That's the concept. To help with childcare, other expenses, but it'll be the parent's decision on how the money gets spent. I think we're good. Thank you for coming out. We're really excited. This is a historic budget, and we look forward to engaging with the legislature to get it passed into law. Thank you so much.